Chapter 8. Gianluca meets the boss. His name was Gianluca Pericolo. As a boy, he was very sick. Just when doctors had given up hope, Passione stepped in and saved him. He and his father, Nunzio Pericolo, joined the syndicate to repay that debt. 6 months ago, he learned of his father's death. His father had placed a gun to his temple and pulled the trigger. Most men would see that as a suicide. Gianluca was not most men. His father had given up his life in exchange for his. He knew this to be the truth. His father had been on a mission so secret he'd not breathed a word of it to his son. Certain that there would be an upheaval within Passione, he assembled his men and prepared for the worst. Less than a week later, the boss revealed his identity to all. Everyone was shocked, everyone but Gianluca. He visited each capo in turn, unarmed, allaying their suspicions. Vowing unswerving loyalty to Giorno is the right choice, he told them. His father had given his life to keep Passione stable. Now it was his turn. In return for his efforts, he was given all the territory his father had run and elevated quickly to a position at the hand of the boss, working directly below Guido Mista. But he took no pride in it. This was his father's work. He merely served in his father's place. He kept himself modest, at a respectful distance. As soon as Pericolo received the message, he went to report its contents to the boss. The boss was in a library in Naples, serving the middle school, high school, and university. The boss was officially a student here. He rarely attended classes, but when he wished to be alone with his thoughts, he would often come here, at least during the night when no students were there. The library was not open yet, so the lights were off. Pericolo picked his way through the darkness. The librarians knew better than to interfere with the gang business and made themselves scarce when he was here. There was no sound anywhere, no sound save the echo of his footsteps. The deeper he went, the older the books became, until all the books were in Latin. A boy was in the art history corner, sitting on a tall stool designed to reach the top shelves, flipping through a book. Politicità di Michelangelo by Giorgio Spini. "Pardon me," he said. "Am I disturbing you?" The boy waved a finger, indicating that he should proceed. Pericolo bowed and began. "We've received a report from Canolo Morolo in intelligence. They have defeated the leader of the narcotics team, Vladimir Kocaqi. Only 3 remain." "A shame," the boy said. "He was a fine man." He had issued the order himself, yet retained respect. As he often did, Pericolo admired the timbre of the boy's voice. It had the solemn dignity of the pipe organ played at church. "It's still far from over," the boy added. Pericolo pulled himself upright. "Yes, I'm afraid so. The message said nothing of Massimo Volpe. Kokaki must have attacked on his own to buy time for his team to flee. They have not yet been located." The boy nodded and returned his gaze to the book. There was an elegance to the way he turned pages that was a marvel to behold. "Any further instructions?" The boy waved a finger. "None needed." "Are you sure you don't want me and my men on this? Given the strength of the targets, we've sent so few after them." He'd suggested this before. The boy did not even dignify it with a response. Repeating himself was useless. "If I could ask one thing," Pericolo asked, mustering his courage. The boy nodded. "Do you trust Fugo?" "I find it difficult to place my faith in him. My father gave his life for the mission he chose to defect on, abandoning his teammates and an innocent girl to save himself. To give a man like that such an important mission seems unwise." He was fully prepared to be rebuked for this statement, but the boy was not the least bit angry. "I know what you mean," he said. "Then why?" No answer came. Pericolo was forced to let the matter drop. "Shall I put the screws on the Sicilian police? Have them on the lookout for Volpe?" Again, the boy wagged his finger. What he said next nearly made Pericolo's eyes pop out of his head. "What do you mean? They'll tell us where they are?" Hello everyone, welcome to the end of that chapter. Quite a short one. since in this case it's actually just an excerpt from the next chapter. It's not the whole chapter, and I decided to call it something new. Gianluca Meets the Boss, which is based on the part 4 chapter titles, Josuke meets Jotaro, or was it the other way around, and then Josuke meets Angelo. In this case, it's Gianluca Pericolo, the son of a character we met in Vento Oreo, meeting the boss of Passione, Giorno Giovanna, of course. Now, I find this little segment of the chapter, that is to say everything I read in this episode, to be perhaps the most irrelevant, meaningless part of the book. I really don't see any reason why this chapter was included. And if I was editor of Purple Haze Feedback, I would have said this is the kind of stuff that you should be cutting, probably. Since I really don't think it gives anything to the reader in terms of things to think about or things to be invested in. It does bring Giorno into the story, and of course Giorno is relevant to Fugo, but he really doesn't do anything here. He barely talks. The only thing we really see about him is that he respected Vladimir Kocaqi. That doesn't say a lot. In fact, I would actually criticize this chapter for characterizing Giorno badly. Instead of actually giving us Giorno, the character we know from Vento Oreo, he actually turns into Dio. Now, that's a very, very bad thing to do with any character, mistaking them for their father, but in this case, I think the author wanted to give Giorno this very strong, intimidating persona as the boss, and then he just turned him into Dio, sitting in the dark reading a book. That's either intentional, in which case it's bad because you're completely misrepresenting a character, turning them from their own, their own person with some personality, even though some may contend against that. Some people do say Giorno has no personality in Vento Oreo. I somewhat disagree, but you've turned Giorno from that person into just a Dio clone. And so if it was intentional, then it's really bad. And if it wasn't intentional, it's even worse, because you accidentally called upon a bunch of tropes in order to make the most evil character in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure a second time. Whichever way you look at it, turning Giorno into Dio was a terrible idea, and for that reason I disagree with, this interpretation of Giorno that we see in this chapter. And so that's one reason why I don't like this chapter. And in general, Purple Haze Feedback has this really annoying feature where basically it just makes Giorno look like the most amazing person ever. We see when Sheila E says, "Oh yeah, and then Giorno killed my sister," Fugo doesn't even say, "Hang on, that was me, I killed that sister. That was a hard-won fight. You can't say Giorno killed your sister when I was the one who did that. You just stop taking my credit, Giorno." There's none of that. He literally just sits down and says, "Oh yeah, I didn't do anything at all. I wasn't the one whose life was on the line and fought with everything I had, even without my stand." He just completely accepts the fact that, oh yeah, Giorno was the one who saved me there. Completely ridiculous, very submissive, and overall very bad writing. It completely misunderstands or demeans Fugo's stake in that fight. Or when Mista says, "Oh yeah, I knew right from the start, Bruno was following Giorno all along." How insulting is that to Bruno? How insulting is that to Mista, who's looked up to Bruno this entire time? And then the author can just say, "Oh yeah, even Mista liked Giorno more than he liked Bruno, or believed in Giorno more than he believed in Bruno." Absolutely ridiculous. Giorno is the one thing that I just cannot stand about Purple Haze Feedback. But more importantly than that, Giorno has flaws. I mean, we saw him drive a car off of a bridge into water when he's fighting an enemy that can turn water into ice. I mean, Giorno has flaws. Giorno makes mistakes, but Purple Haze Feedback completely ignores that in favor of a very perfectionist, a very solipsistic, Dio-like character who exists above everyone else, a higher plane of existence, a higher human being than anyone else. And I mean solipsistic in that sense, not that Giorno only the literal sense of solipsism, where Giorno believes he is the only one who is important, but rather the author believes Giorno is the only one who is important in Passione, the only one who has defined these characters' lives, and that is just stupid, and that is just very lazy writing. We lose all of this characterization, we lose, Giorno's flaws as a character when the author just turns him into this amazing person. And that's consistent throughout Purple Haze Feedback. He never makes Giorno a more complex character than just a very shallow, very superficial Dio clone. It's silly, and I don't really like that aspect of Purple Haze Feedback, and that's basically all this chapter is. And so you can see why I didn't really like this chapter at all. Now that we are talking about Giorno and Purple Haze feedback, I should get this out of the way as well. I don't like how Giorno, his motivation in Vento Oreo was selling drugs to kids is bad. And this book completely changes that to drugs are bad. And one of the reasons, absolutely one of the reasons that change has been made is so that the drugs team can be made into the enemies rather than just people who sell drugs to kids. Because the whole point of selling drugs to kids is that only the most evil, depraved characters would be willing to engage in that. But people who sell drugs, people who make drugs, can be a bit more redeemable, shall we say. That's the whole reason why Giorno only cared for people who sold drugs to kids, because drugs by themselves, you know, people can kill themselves because of it, but that doesn't have to be the case. People can take it in moderation if they want to ruin their lives. Bruno specifically says this to Giorno, I think, or was it the other way around? If people want to ruin their lives using drugs, that's fine, but selling drugs to kids who don't have the ability to make that decision for themselves is what's completely screwed up, and that's what motivates Giorno to join Passione, join Bruno in overthrowing the boss. So that change to Giorno is another thing that I don't like about Purple Haze feedback, but the rest of Purple Haze feedback is perfectly fine. Just anything to do with Giorno I have a fundamental disagreement with. The other character that we see in this chapter is Gianluca Pericolo, who we never see again. We see him this one time, we get his backstory, as silly as it is, and we never see him again. And so because of that, I thought it would be okay to give Gianluca a Scottish accent, a very heavy Scottish accent, a very badly done Scottish accent, but, you know, one that I wanted to try nonetheless, record it and just have fun with it. And so this is a chapter that you guys can get to hear it. Leave your thoughts in the comments regarding that. I would like to hear your opinions on it. Actually, I know Meti listens to this audiobook, so I was tempted to get him to do the voice for Gianluca as like a guest appearance, since he does only ever appear in this one short little section. And so it'd be very interesting to have like another YouTuber join, but in the end I never got around to that. Medi, if you're listening, there are still a couple of roles that are open, no doubt, so perhaps we can set something up and we can do like a little bit of a collaboration, shall I say. Anyway, so Gianluca is the son of Pericolo, and an operative from Passione that we saw in Vento Oreo. And this chapter gives him a backstory, why he joined the gang to begin with, what he owes the boss, what makes him so loyal to the boss. And this loyalty carries over to his son, except his son thinks that the boss was Giorno all along. And this is acceptable to a point. I mean, I'm not entirely sold on that premise, simply because if you think about it, Pericolo is quite a senior figure. His son is actually probably older than Giorno. So that alone kind of gives you pause for thought. It doesn't really seem well thought out. But more importantly, Pericolo is one of those characters in Vento Oreo that actually doesn't need explaining on any level. He's one of those characters that just exists. He is an operative of Passione, that's all you need to know. And giving him a backstory, giving him a son who never appears again, you know, it just muddies the water and makes it feel like it's trying so hard to be inducted into the canon of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure that it just feels bogged down and weighted with all these connections to the original story. It could have been Fugo and Ch.8 and Kokaki taking on the narcotics team, and there's nobody else from the original Vento Oreo cast other than Fugo. That's all we needed, a 3 versus 4, and Fugo every once in a while reminisces goddamn, about his past with Bruno's team. Like, that's all we really needed. But then the author decides to introduce like these unnecessary connections that nobody asked for. Nobody wanted a backstory for Pericolo. He was just a cool character who has like the cross eyes, which is a really cool design feature that we never see in JoJo again, unfortunately. Or we haven't yet, rather, I should say. Even Bruno looked up to and respected him, and that's the extent that we needed to understand him. He is just a really cool person from Passione who likes Bruno and wants to take care of him, and eventually sacrificed himself for the betterment of the gang. Little did he know that he was actually trying to help a psychopath in the boss. That is a perfectly beautiful story, and in fact him having a son, him being attached to the boss simply because of, you know, this very generic cliche thing, oh, he saved my son, I have to pay him back, completely invalidates, well, it doesn't completely invalidate, but it cheapens it drastically. And that's what I'm really angry about here. in the previous episode as well, Marolo is connected to why the assassination squad betrayed Diavolo, when it's revealed that he was the one who gave information about the boss to Sorbet and Gelato, and he was the one who gave information about Sorbet and Gelato to the assassination squad. And we don't need that. The assassination squad were already a very compelling group of characters that got shit done for themselves. They didn't need Marolo to be helping them. It was enough that he was the one who fixed the photograph, the burnt photograph of the train station in Venice. That was enough. But then here we see how he helped the assassination squad with betrayal simply because he's a psychopath, essentially. Simply because he likes to revel in other people fighting against each other. And it does hint at that very well, you know, it makes you realize that Marolo is a liar when he says that, oh, I didn't know that the assassination squad were traitors, when he did know, and he was the one who started all that to begin with. You realize that he doesn't care about other people at all, but it's at the expense of giving answers that we didn't ask for, that we didn't care for, and Purple Haze Feedback just does a little bit too much of that with characters that we don't really care about from the original work from Vento Oreo. It's bloat. That's all it is. It's just not fun to read at all when we already have characters in Purple Haze Feedback that we don't get enough development on. Like Marolo, like Ch.8, like the crazy guy in the narcotics team, Vittorio Cataldi. We have his philosophy, but we don't have any meaningful connection towards him. Where's the room for that when we're already halfway through the novel? Now that we are talking about the previous chapter, let's move on to the big fight against Kokaki. That took place in the Teatro Greco in Taormina. I had a bit of trouble pronouncing that. You'll notice if you rewatch that episode that every time I say Teatro Greco, I kind of have to pause to set myself up to get into the Italian mood, shall I say. Anyway, so we fight against Kokaki and his stand, Rainy Day Dream Away, which I think is a very, very cool stand. The fact that it was the rain that had surrounded them all along was such a fantastic reveal when I first read it. One of the few details that I actually hadn't forgotten in all of Purple Haze Feedback. So that was really, really, really cool when Fugo looks up and he's like, oh shit, the rain was the stand all along. That was really cool. What wasn't too cool is the way it was beaten, how Fugo just like fell sideways out of the theater. Seems a little bit silly, like he couldn't use his stand to just like grab his collar, grab onto some rock nearby, grab onto the stairs or something, and then just like hold him there. Seems kind of ridiculous. And then the whole thing with, you know, throwing himself into the sky and landing perfectly on Kokaki seems just a little bit too good to be true, and overall very contrived, very silly, not the kind of tactical fight that you would see in an Araki written fight. The fight itself seems a little bit contrived, but Kokaki and Rainy Day Dream Away and how he interacts with each of the characters by themselves are all really good, and so because of that I still think this is a fantastic fight. It's just not a fight in the way we expect JoJo fights to classically be. Speaking of Kokaki, I think he's honestly one of the best characters of the book. His backstory, for example, was much better than Ch.8's. A very, very good backstory, since it pretty much informs everything that Kokaki knows and feels and communicates. His philosophy, basically, his worldview, that there is no difference between reality and an illusion, and so there's no reason to fight against any of it, since everything is preordained, everything is deterministic, everything's been decided for us, everything has been fated, and fate, of course, a very important theme in Vento Oreo, and Fugo himself is trying to overthrow that fate. He never got the opportunity to do that in Vento Oreo, despite being part of Bruno's team, since he was kicked out early, and so Fugo is trying to overthrow his fate, and he's trying to question, you know, like when he constantly brings up Narancia, he's trying to question, did I do the right thing? Am I following a correct path? And so Kokaki is very much the manifestation of that, the one who pronounces it to Fugo and to the audience that you should give in to your fate, that there's no point in fighting against any of it, since there is no difference between reality and an illusion. And of course that comes from the fact that his sister lived 80 years of her life as an illusion in the 2 minutes it took for her to die, which doesn't actually make sense to me. I mean, how do you live 80 years in 2 minutes? Like, you must have really been, that must have been quite the delusion that you could just kind of like see an entire life in 2 minutes. That's that's pretty crazy and kind of incredible in the literal sense of the word. Perhaps the author kind of stretching the limits of the stand a little bit. I would think that 2 minutes worth of delusion would just be 2 minutes of life. That's how I would apply the power to that situation. But whatever. Either way, I think Kokaki's backstory is very, very good. Again, like I said, much better than what we got for Ch.8. And Marolo doesn't really even have a backstory. He just does things for the assassination squad, is apparently the backstory that the author is willing to give us. Quite a shame and a missed opportunity, I would say. And finally, we get to the last big thing of the previous episode, which was the moment when Bruno finds out that the boss of Passione is actually dealing drugs. In Vento Oreo, there's this awesome moment where Bruno finds out that the boss is actually trying to kill Trish, and he says, "You've already betrayed my heart once, and now you've betrayed it a second time." And you see the anger. It's such a palpable moment that describes Bruno's character, his motivations. And that moment where he says, "You've already betrayed my heart once," we actually get to see it fleshed out here. And this is the stuff that I really wanted to see from Purple Haze feedback. And like I said earlier just in this video, this is the part that the author should be focusing on. We see flashbacks to moments he shared with Bruno's squad. This is the stuff that I really wanted to see, not just, oh, and then this character that I just created, yeah, he answers this plot hole that no one wanted answers for anyway. Very, very, very good moment this is, where Bruno's just sitting in the darkness and he asks Fugo to play Elevator to the Gallows, a fantastic album. If you haven't listened to it, I think it's on YouTube, so you can totally just search for it right now and you should be able to listen to the whole thing. Of course, that is technically illegal, but yeah, it's worth it for the music, and in fact, if you like it, then I highly recommend you buy it. And you actually did hear a little bit of it in the previous episode. When Fugo pops the record on, you hear the trumpet that goes or something along those lines. I can't really sing, but you know, it is enchanting and it's tragic and it's absolutely beautiful. And when Fugo turns around and you see Bruno's face just carved into marble, cold and dedicated to the idea that he must now kill the boss for betraying his heart, as Bruno himself said. That moment, what an absolutely beautiful moment. And of course it takes place when Fugo is falling endlessly, and he flashes back to this moment, and this is where I think we see the first real character development in Fugo. It's a moment where he stops doubting his mission. It's the moment where he stops saying, maybe I shouldn't kill these people, which was actually voiced earlier in the chapter when he's like, oh, Kokaki's not really fighting me, maybe I should like take him in for questioning, maybe I'm not really doing the right thing here. Those concerns are voiced by Fugo himself in an internal monologue. But now, you know, there are no doubts to him. He is driven by a pure anger, the same anger that he felt when he beat the professor's head in, as the chapter itself says. And he's angry at the fate that Bruno had to face because of drugs, because of his own struggles against the boss's dealing of narcotics. And so this is what drives him to leap at Kokaki, leap presumably like hundreds of meters into the air, just so he can fall straight down on Kokaki and unleash Purple Haze on him. And we actually get a specific contrast to Ch.8, who is stated saying, unlike Fugo, she had no doubt about wanting to attack Kokaki, she just rushes straight at him, and of course Kokaki dodges her. But, you know, she is the one who has been convinced by Giorno, the Giorno of Purple Haze feedback at any rate, that drugs are bad. And she is completely willing to sacrifice herself and kill Kokaki at the instant she sees him in order to achieve Giorno's ideals. But yeah, so we finally see Purple Haze in action in Purple Haze feedback, the second time ever, can I say, since Purple Haze itself is only used once ever in Vento Oreo proper, and that's a real shame, but here we get the opportunity to see it once more. And it would have been really nice of Araki to have an illustration of Kokaki dying to Purple Haze, since, well, we never actually get to see Purple Haze's virus besides that one time with Illuso, but there is no illustration of that virus just consuming Kokaki. And so I had to make do with the panels of Illuso dying to the same virus. And the chapter ends with Ch.8 witnessing Kokaki's death to Purple Haze. Now, I'm wondering what Ch.8 thinks of Purple Haze, since Purple Haze was what killed her sister, and she doesn't know this, because Giorno says that Illuso just died in the worst way possible, the absolute most horrendous, painful way imaginable, in fact unimaginable. That's the specific word he uses. It's so bad it was unimaginable. And Sheila He was more than happy to hear that. She said, wow, this person that I've hated my entire life, Giorno was the one who eliminated him in this horrible, painful way. And she's happy to Giorno. What she doesn't know is that it was actually Purple Haze who actually gave that horrible, horrible death to Illuso. And so I wonder what Sheila E would think if Fugo were to say, yeah, you know how I killed Kokaki, that horrible virus that just you couldn't get over how painful and terrible it looked? Yeah, that's how I killed your sister's murderer. How do you feel about that? That's a question that I'm very curious to see if the author answers, and it really makes me want to read past what I'm actually reading out to you guys. But I've contained myself so far. I've limited myself to this very short excerpt from the next chapter that I've read to you in this video. And so with all that being said, we have truly reached the end of the episode this time. If you enjoyed the video, the short chapter at the start and this very, very long, I'm at 25 minutes of recording. It will be a bit shorter than that after editing, but wow, a very long kind of review actually, since we are about halfway through the book. I guess like a look back at the past half of the book and a look forward to what exactly we can expect to see in the next half of the book. If you enjoyed all of that, then I'm really happy, because not a lot of people would. I recommend subscribing if you're excited for more of this. I recommend liking the video, of course, since that does help the channel and does help the video to get more exposure. But if you didn't like it, then perhaps a dislike would be a bit more meaningful to you. In fact, it would be more meaningful to me as well, since I can actually gauge how much you guys are enjoying this kind of analysis, whether you guys want it at all, to be honest, and whether I should just shut up and finish the episode. So let's do that. Until the next episode, take care guys, and I hope you enjoy the last half of Purple Haze feedback.